Just to give you an idea of what's behind the camera, this is where Tracker and I are. We throw a ball here quite often. He really likes coming here. So, trying to find a way to maximize my time. And I'm having difficulty doing some things where I make sure I get a lot of stuff done for the membership. Thought I might combine it with, hey, I do this every morning, so why not take one of the days and make a AAR for you all here in the membership. I wanted to show you where I am so you know when you see me doing this, you know what I'm doing. I'm throwing ball to Tracker. We just had our level 2 survival class, and there's a lot of lessons learned in this class about what we talk about all the time: mindset, skills, tactics, and gear. And I wanted to share some of those lessons because those of us here in the membership, again, we're learning, you're learning on video, but I want to I really want to combine our in-person folks with our membership folks. There's a lot of crossover anyway, and use that as learning opportunities for both of us. Because the goal of the membership is to reach a larger number of people because, hey, you don't have to travel to Kentucky to train with us. And at the same time, I want you to be able to take what you're learning here in the membership and get outside and do stuff. So we can take advantage of learning from these people that have come to a class and use the lessons learned there to pass on to you all here in the membership. So again, take the lessons that I'm going to share with you, apply them to wherever you live, and do what you can to get outside and put them into practice. Because as you're getting ready to find out, and some of the things that I'm going to discuss, there are some lessons that the only way to learn them is to get out and do things. So I hope that impresses upon your mind the need to get out and do stuff. So we just had our level 2 survival class, and let's talk about the pre-class, lead up to it, what happened in class, and some of the lessons learned. Leading up to the class, we had here in Kentucky the opportunity for lots of snow. As you can see, it happened. It actually happened before, but on the day that people were driving in, which was Friday, there was a chance of getting 6 to 7 inches of snow. That ended up not transpiring, but we had to plan accordingly for that as an instructor group. In this particular class, we had myself, Davey Black, Clayton Worrell, James Nayhouse, and Patrick Allen. Patrick Allen this was his first time doing level 2. The other instructors had been through it, and so he was coming in as a student. So leading up to it, I said, hey, Patrick, I don't want you to worry about any instructor responsibilities. I want you to come in and focus on yourself as a team member in the class, as well as him growing his own skill set, which he did exceptionally well. I'll talk about that in a minute, because there were some things that he really pushed the envelope on and learned some valuable lessons on in a good way. That was the instructor group. Leading up to it, we have a text group for each class. The instructors that I know that are coming, we separate them off from the larger text group because we've got instructors in several different locations and we communicate on things. So we pulled them off, and if I don't know how else to say it, but I agonized. I don't know about them, but I agonized over the idea of having a class at all. My concern was travel conditions being problematic, and I didn't want two things. I didn't want the students to have issues driving into class, and I didn't want them to have issues driving home for class, and maybe even more so after class, because before class, people were pumped up, energized, ready to rock. After class, you work really hard, you're tired, you get very little sleep, and now you got to drive 6, 7, 8 hours home. And if the weather was bad, I just didn't I just didn't like that. Okay. So we agonized over it. But we're looking at one of the big lessons that I've been trying to tell people to listen to is don't pay attention to TV personalities on the weather. And don't pay attention to their Facebook post about the weather. I'm not saying that they're in agreement with the grocery stores. I'm not saying that at all. I'm not one of those guys and gals. But I do know that to create a position and keep a position for themselves, they have to get viewers. And so they've got to make what they do exciting. What I've been recommending to people is to get an app, get 2 or 3 of them if you can afford them, or get the free ones or get the free versions, and monitor the forecast on apps and see how it plays out in the real world. For me, here in Central Kentucky, I use the WKYT app. I found that it's more accurate than the weather app. And my meteorological friends in the Master Naturalist program at UK say that they all share information, but some of them have just a little bit of a tweak here and there, and they might have a piece of equipment that somebody else doesn't have. I don't know that WKYT does, but I do know that I have found it to be pretty accurate as it relates. I say all that because the app that I'm monitoring was showing 1 to 3 inches tops for Friday. So I'm thinking that's not a big deal. We told our students a week ahead of time, we're going to make a decision by Wednesday at the latest, Wednesday night. We'll notify you. On Tuesday, the instructor group went back and forth for quite a while, debating all the pros and cons, the risk assessment, risk analysis, all the things that could be problematic, like driving conditions, hypothermia at the class. If someone gets injured, can we get them out of there? Where's the closest hospital? All these things that we do as an instructor cadre behind the scenes. I'm telling you now not to go, oh, cool, I'm glad they do that. You should be doing that too whenever you go into the outdoors. You should be doing risk assessment, risk analysis every time you go out. That's incredibly important. So we did that. We made the call. I took all the information I could from the other instructors and said, all right, let's run with it. And we did. We notified everybody, and there were 3 people that said, you know, I'm not going to take the risk of doing that. They were pretty far away. They were actually very far away. And I applauded them for that and told them they were making the right decision. And I actually told them, hey, we got another level 2 in the summer. You're not going to lose your money, kind of thing. That's how we do things. You should see our policy page. If there's some extenuating circumstances, we will reschedule you for another class. It's not a problem. Told them that that's fine. Just come in the summer or come next winter, whatever. We'll make sure that they get a spot. Because I don't want people I never want people that make an assessment of their own safety and the risk associated with them, because they are boots on the ground for their own driving skills, boots on the ground for their own road system wherever they are. And I can't in my position know all that stuff for 15 to 20 students in a class. So I'll support you in that particular situation. So they stayed home. We decided to have a class. It ended up, from my perspective, I felt like we were really blessed because the people that came all did really well. The weather wasn't that bad. Now, what we did do as an instructor cadre is we normally have classes in a small rural community of Wellington, Kentucky, on a private farm. Those of you who've been to classes know very well where we go and do things. We have a great time there. It's a great place. But the roads leading into it, because it is a small rural community, are suspect. So we made the determination to go to another location. We were very fortunate, incredibly fortunate, that we had three separate guys that work inside of the Cooperative Extension Service for the University of Kentucky. 2 of them are camp directors, and they offered their camps. The 2 of those guys offered their camps. One of them, again, pretty far out. So we made the decision to go to another camp that wasn't as far out and we felt like would have better roads to it. Worked out great, actually. I was very pleased that we went to the camp that we did. But here's what that did. It gave us a bunch of unknowns. The camp director obviously knows the property well, but I didn't, nor did any of the other instructors because we had never been there. Except Patrick Allen, who had been there numerous times. Patrick, again, I wanted him to not worry about instructional responsibilities. I wanted him to focus on his training. But Patrick was real good about offering his advice because he had been there numerous times, and it was his recommendation, hey, I think we should go to this particular camp, and we did. And in the end, it worked out exceptionally well. So here's what we had when we got there. We had a cabin that we had access to in a new location. That was pretty paramount of importance to me. At our regular location, we have a GP tent, a military tent, and we have vehicles that are close by to that GP tent. If we had trouble, we could get people into a vehicle, trouble meaning hypothermia or injury or something. We could get people into that vehicle, warm them up, get them to a hospital or something of that nature. Again, that's never happened to us, but we're always running the risk assessment, risk analysis of such problems and making sure we have solutions. This worked out really well because what we told our students coming in, and if you come to class, I don't want to blow the surprise for you because I like surprises for students, but on Friday night, the students come in and they don't get the opportunity to build a fire. So the weather that particular night got down to 13 degrees and in an unknown location. Everybody was new to it. They're not allowed to have a fire. But what the instructors do is we have a fire going, and in this particular case, we had a fire going inside the cabin. It's not insulated. Away from the hearth, it was just as cold outside, if not colder. But it was one of those situations where, from a risk assessment, we had to have some sort of backup. And I'm glad we did because a couple of people needed it, and it was a gear issue more than anything else. It wasn't a mindset, skills, teamwork. It was a gear issue, and I want to help you with that gear issue. The instructors set up, build the fire. The students came in. They went out on their own, solo, without any assistance from anybody else, set up their shelters for the night. They have to come into this class with 25 pounds or less. So the first thing that we do when they come in is weigh their packs and make sure they're under 25 pounds. Most people came in somewhere around that 20 to 22 pound range, which was pretty good. I think we had somebody with 17 or 18 pounds. I think that was the lightest. I didn't check them all. Clayton was checking all the weights. But I think 17 or 18 pounds was the lightest. And so we set out, did that. We had one person that came into the cabin around 1:30, 2 o'clock. And that person came in for the simple fact that they were really pushing the limits. They tried to go super light without a sleeping bag. And their thought was, hey, I've found myself in a lot. And this is what we love for people to try, is push the envelope because you got backup. And if it doesn't work out, you've learned that that's not going to work. You utilize the backup, the instructors and the fire that we had. And then moving forward, you've got to have a solution for that. So one of the people came in around 1:30, 2 o'clock to the cabin, took advantage of the fire being there because that person didn't even have a sleeping bag. They had a really light pad, no sleeping bag. They were wearing good layers. And the thought was at that time, hey, I'm just going to lean up against a tree and try to make it. They didn't make it. That would be my first recommendation. That we hear these stories of the frontiersmen lean up against a tree, and I think one of the things that we miss, and this is on me because I talk about this a lot and I've got to be more clear about it, some of those frontiersmen that were leaning up against a tree were leaning up against a beech tree that was 8 foot in diameter and had a cavity in it, and they're basically inside of a wickiup. So they're out of the wind and had the advantage of that. That is one of the things that we might miss when you hear me speaking of the history of frontiersmen leaning up against a tree. That's on me. So this person came in, But the thing that I feel like pretty strongly brought them in was wet feet and cold feet. The people in class, this is a big gear issue for several people in class. Throughout the weekend, the people came in that were thinking, hey, I'm going to go out with what I hike with and what I normally make my way with. They ended up with wet feet, straight up. In a snow-covered event like we had, where it's really cold, then just regular hiking boots and socks, 3/4 length or, ankle height hiking boots, that's a no-go. It just doesn't work. You'll end up getting snow down in your boots. If your boots are not exceptionally rubberized, it doesn't matter if they're Gore-Tex. There's a lot of crap floating around about whether Gore-Tex actually works or not. I'm one of those people that thinks that it doesn't. Those people who had Gore-Tex boots on ended up with wet feet. I'll just say it that way. They just ended up with wet feet. And I've been watching this happen for years. The issue is if you're wearing rubber boots like muck boots or something. Sorry, buddy. If you're wearing muck boots or something, they're just uncomfortable, and your feet can overheat, get too hot, sweat. Now you got water on your feet again, whether you got snow on them or not. You've got to find that happy medium for you. In this particular class, there's more walking than normal in our classes. We had to walk where we killed quail. We had to walk down to different locations to find some water and stuff of that nature. We actually did have a bathroom that we ended up utilizing because we were on camp property and we didn't want to defecate just in latrines and stuff because of the camp situation. So we actually did go and use their bathroom, their toilet. Number one, in the woods. Number two, we went to a toilet. So lots of walking to get there. With that said, the boots were an issue for a lot of people. There were some people that came in with so many layers and got into their sleeping bags with so many layers that they just got cold. I'll say it again. Get a good sleeping pad that insulates you from the ground. That means get a pad that has insulation in it, or create the insulation out here. When you got snow on the ground, that's difficult. Snow with loft will be an insulator, but once you pack yourself down on top of it and you don't have a good insulating pad, two things happen, and this happened to some of our students. One is that the cold goes right through the pad and goes into you, and two, the heat from you goes through the pad and goes in the earth and creates moisture on the bottom of the pad, which creates ice, which creates a situation where you slide all the way around while you're trying to sleep. Very problematic. That happened to several people in class. So the R value of sleeping pads is an integral piece of going in the outdoors in weather like this particularly. If not, you've got to create some sort of barrier between you and the snow that's going to help you stay put. Pine boughs, cedar boughs, hemlock boughs, something that is going to be there for you. If you got grass, get some grass. In this particular case, we did not have access to a lot of tall grass to be able to do that. So that ended up being a pretty significant problem. Now, what we did do is on night 2 is everybody got to work with inside of a team, and they did get to build a fire. So I've got a video I shared on our Facebook group. If you're on our Facebook group, go check it out. But Jay Barry Miller from Tough Possum Gear had this little device that measures the minimum and maximum temperature over a certain period of time. I haven't looked at it closely yet. I've got the video, and he actually gave me one. But it was really cool because the temperature got down to 17 degrees that night, and that device was hanging on the ridge line of his tarp setup, and the lowest it got was 29 degrees, and the highest it got was, I think it was 82. Think about that. Now, I'm sure that's because some of the heat blew towards the gauge, and it was really warm there for a while, but it did read up to 82 degrees, which we found for years. Tracy Trimble did this years ago. Heck, that might have been our very first level 2 class, where he was measuring temps inside of his tarp setup and outside in the woods. I'm telling you that because If you build a lean-to setup that has reflective material like a cheap Mylar, or you buy a tarp that has reflective material built into it, then, and you build a fire, then one of the things that'll happen is that heat comes off, and it's beneficial to you because the heat just bounces back on you and keeps you warm. Think about that. 17 degrees outside, and for a portion of the night, inside of his tarp was 82 degrees. Now, it wasn't like that a sustained 82 degrees. If it had been, he'd have been sleeping out on top, and we've had students do that, where we've built super shelters, put the plastic in front, and it basically creates a convection oven. If you haven't looked at that, look up Morris Kahansky. He's the one that made super shelters famous. He's not the one that came up with the idea, but he is the one that made it rather famous. So look that up, super shelters. In this particular class, we had one group that set a couple of those up. There was one group in a figure 4, and so you've got 2 on this side and 2 on this side. Here's what happened to them that was interesting. It was a rectangle, it wasn't a square. So what happened is, and the reason we do this is you got 4 people that are tending to the fire through the night. What happened was, in this rectangle, when the people that were farther out were putting more wood on the fire because they were chilled, because not as much heat was reaching them, and it was basically due to a terrain feature. They had to be spread out like that. It wasn't like there's perfect 4 set of trees that you can just create this perfect square. It's never like that. Not in Kentucky, it's not. So the guys that were on the outside were building a bigger fire. The guys that were closer, they were burning up and basically laying with t-shirts on inside their tents, because they had, or in their shelters, because they had set up super shelters and were retaining so much heat. So they got overheated. You never want to sweat in the outdoors, and that's a problem. So they would let the fire go down small, continue to keep the fire going, but when the guys woke up that were farther out, they were making a bigger fire. So that's an interesting thing to consider. As much as you can make a square, the better off you're going to be. And what we have found is somewhere around a moderate-sized fire, meaning 2 or 3 foot in diameter fire, that has flames about 2 feet, will take you out. If you can keep your shelters around 3 feet away from that, you're going to get a lot of heat. Now, here's the key to that, is that what happened with one group is they were about 4 or 5 feet out in this square. They did exceptionally well, and I've preached this message for years, and people just choose not to listen to me. Not this group, but I want you to listen to me. It's really dependent upon the wood and the BTU content. The group that was 4 or 5 feet out, they had some really dense, they had, I think it was a coffee tree. One of them was a hickory. These are all dead woods. And one of them was a locust. If you know anything about wood, those are all very dense woods, and they burn exceptionally hot. If they had been in 3 feet and built a long fire like they did, and I'll explain a long fire in a moment, then they would have cooked. So they wouldn't have needed such a big fire. They had a pretty sizable fire, again, 4 or 5 feet out, and it worked well for them. Most of them, at least. One of the guys that was farther out, he was probably a good 6, 7 feet. He got cold. And again, it was a terrain feature. It was a tree feature, too. The way they tied up the ridge lines, he was a little bit farther out. Therefore, where's the ball? Bring me the ball. Bring me the ball right here. Good boy. Good boy. So again, 3 foot diameter fire, 2 to 3 foot flames, good solid hardwoods. You might use pine or hemlock or birch or something like that to get a fire going. But those hardwoods are going to be important to having a small fire that puts out a lot of heat, and about 3 feet away. You know, last year in our -9 degree class, the people that took that class, we had a pretty sizable fire. Most of it was pine, though. Burns fast, but and goes up quickly, so we had to tend to fire a lot. We didn't have a lot of hardwoods, so it didn't put out as much heat. So keep in mind this, when and if you can, if you're in an area, those hardwoods are going to be your better choices for a fire that is in that, hey, you set up about 3 foot away from it. The other things that we did that were beneficial is we talk about layers. I wore this big. This jacket's huge. It's a 2X. It's exceptionally large on me for a reason. I like wearing a vest underneath of it. Basically, what I wore for the whole weekend was a waffle knit insulated shirt that had a hood on it, a down vest, and then this on top of it. So anytime that there was any snow or any spitting of anything, I zip this up, because you don't want any sort of down, whether it's a sleeping bag, a vest, a jacket, or whatever. You don't want it to get wet, because it will not insulate when it gets wet. And it doesn't matter. Don't tell me, hey, they make down that's waterproof now, and it doesn't. I'm just telling you, I've seen hundreds of people come to class now, and they'll have this very high dollar, expensive waterproof down, and it just doesn't matter, you all. Down just does not insulate when it's wet. It just doesn't do a good job of it. Moderate job of it. That worked for me all weekend. If I got warm, like when I was gathering firewood and I was tearing camp down, I just actually took this jacket off, or I completely unzipped it and did that. Now, I don't have it on now, but the waffle knit insulating layer that I have underneath is one of those that has the thumb loops, and it comes out and covers the palm of your hand. I've got to find a link for you, and if I find it, I'll put it in there. But the Department of Defense has been doing an exceptionally good study on both how to retain heat and how to remove heat. And one of the things they're finding is that through the pads of your feet and through the palms of your hands, you lose or can retain a lot of heat. Meaning, if you're in a hot environment and you need to cool off, put your palms in cold water. Same thing as if you're in a cold weather event and you put your hands in cold water, you're going to remove a lot of heat from your whole body. You'll lose manual dexterity and stuff of that nature, and all the stuff that goes along with it. There's a real fantastic study, and again, if I can find it, I'll link for you. So I didn't wear gloves nearly all weekend, but I'm teaching, I'm showing stuff, and most of the stuff I'm showing, we did figure 4 traps. We showed where to place them. We did squirrel pose. We showed where to place them. We killed quail. We processed quail. We fixed quail and ate the quail. We did Davey Black did the whole section on quail. He did all the processing, showed everybody how to do that. Clayton did the section on water. He was showing how to select good snow, and it goes beyond, I know everybody knows, the yellow snow, you don't want to get it, but there's a lot of things that go to it on selecting good, clean snow so you don't get a lot of garbage in your bottle when you're collecting snow. He also talked about filtration, purification, and melting in the process. It's basically 10 to 1. If you pack in a bottle and you fill it full of snow, you'll probably have about 1/10 of what you need. You'll have to do that about 10 more times after you melt it. So that was a very worthwhile piece of instruction. James Nayhouse was there. He took us on a fantastic walk where we talked about animal tracks. Anytime that we have snow, we're going to do animal tracking because it's so easy for people to see. We saw rabbits and turkey and deer, coyotes, domestic dogs, fox, lots of critters. We talked about how to utilize that understanding and the pieces you learn from tracking on setting up traps. That was a fantastic piece that Nayhouse taught. Again, I taught the figure 4s and the fire building and stuff of that nature. Trying to think if there's any last pieces. Trying to go through it on a timeline rather than the straight up AAR version. But anyway, I hope this helps. The students that were there ranged from students that had taken this class before to people that hadn't spent much time outside at all. We had a person there that had never killed an animal ever and killed a quail with their bare hands and processed it and ate it. We had students there that hadn't spent much time overnight outside, that were out in 16-degree weather without a fire and with the right gear that they learned how to utilize in level 1 and did exceptionally well. We had, again, Patrick Allen that really pushed the envelope on minimal gear, leaned up against a tree. He did really well, but he was one along with about 4 others that ended up having trouble with wet, cold feet. Wet, cold feet are not a good thing to have, and you can have your pants right, you can have your jackets right, you can have your gloves right and your head right, and cold feet are a demoralizer. So focus on your feet, you all. It's real important. Very thankful for people like Patrick that, he's an instructor. He didn't have to do this. He pushed the envelope. Love it. Love seeing him really pushing the limits on doing this sort of thing. These other people that were brand new to a lot of stuff, really pushing themselves. There were people that, hey, Friday's probably not a good travel day. They actually bit the bullet, came in on Thursday, got a hotel room just so they could come to class, so they could be close. It was a great group. Man, it's just humbling for me as the director of Nature Reliance School. Been doing this stuff been doing this stuff with people outside of my family since 2006. Been doing this kind of stuff with my family since, I was born in 1969, probably 74, 75, going out and doing this stuff. So humbling to see people pushing the limits. It's absolutely fascinating. If you have questions, put them here in the membership. Remember, any of these videos that are longer, I have to put them on YouTube. They're not for the general public to see. They're just for you members, so don't be sharing these around. I just want people that are supporting the school to get this information. I'll put out free stuff to people all the time, but I really want to focus a lot of attention on you all that are supporting me and my family and the school and all the things that you do. Cannot thank you enough for it. So with All Things Nature Reliance School, I hope this has helped you learn to come on, join in, and learn together. One last throw for tracker before I throw it, turn it off.